For decades, stories about unidentified flying objects were dismissed as nothing more than products of human imagination. But what happens when the United States government is forced to admit that something is silently flying through our skies far beyond the reach of modern scientific understanding? And what truths are truly hidden behind those strange encounters, those mysterious radar readings, and the skies filled with secrets never before revealed? Let's uncover it together in today's video. So, fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you might just change your luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. On a frigid afternoon of November 17, 1986, high above the skies of Alaska, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was making its journey from Paris back to Tokyo. The aircraft, a Boeing 747 measuring 70 meters in length and boasting a wingspan of over 60 meters, was carrying a heavy load of cargo, but only 3 men were aboard. Captain Tarachi Kenju, a veteran pilot with more than 10,000 flight hours and a former member of the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, sat behind the controls alongside First Officer Tiapuji Takanori and Flight Engineer Yoshio Takuba. The 3 men believed they were undertaking just another routine flight until something happened. At around 5:10 p.m. local time, as the 747 was cruising at an altitude of 10,000 meters and preparing to enter the airspace near Anchorage, Captain Taruchi suddenly noticed 2 strange streams of light behind the aircraft, positioned near the 700 direction. The unidentified objects emitted a dazzling yellow-white glow and shot forward ahead of the aircraft at an astonishing speed. They came to a stop about 1 mile ahead on the left side of the plane, hovering as if defying the very laws of gravity. It was not only Taruchi who witnessed the phenomenon. Inside the narrow cockpit, First Officer Tamapuji and Flight Engineer Takuba also simultaneously observed the strange sight. The captain immediately established communication with ground control. At approximately 5:18 p.m., the first exchanges crackled over the radio frequency. "This is Japan Airlines Flight 1628. We have detected 2 unidentified flying objects ahead of us. Please confirm if there are any aircraft near our position." Initially, ground control responded that no aircraft were appearing on radar in the vicinity. According to them, given the air traffic density at that time, there should have been no other aircraft besides Flight 1628 at that altitude. However, just a few minutes later, a voice from ground control broke in again. They had detected an object trailing behind the 747 at the 6 o'clock position, approximately 5 miles away. Taruchi continued updating ground control. He described the 2 objects ahead as being massive in size, comparable to the 747 itself. They emitted light from countless small ports, rotating like 2 colossal rollers, while the centers of the objects remained a dense, deep darkness, as if a hollow void had opened in the sky. As the 2 objects drew closer, narrowing the distance to about 150 meters, their yellow-white radiance became so intense that it illuminated the cockpit, bathing the entire cabin in a brightness akin to broad daylight. The flight crew could even feel waves of heat radiating through the air, as though the aircraft were flying directly through a furnace. Yet after several breathless minutes, the 2 objects suddenly altered course, allowing the aircraft to surge ahead. The strange encounter, which had lasted for 12 minutes, seemed for a fleeting moment to have ended, but in truth, it was merely the beginning of a long and mysterious night over the skies of Alaska. Captain Taruchi and his colleagues had barely begun to breathe a sigh of relief when another unsettling phenomenon emerged. Just 5 minutes later, once again, strange streaks of light suddenly flashed into view. But this time, it was not the dazzling yellow-white glow of the earlier 2 objects. Rather, it was 2 gentle blue lights quietly hovering in front of the aircraft's nose. At first, Taruchi thought he might be experiencing a visual illusion brought on by the prolonged tension of the past several minutes. But when all three men in the cockpit simultaneously confirmed the presence of the two luminous objects, he understood that what they were facing far exceeded anything for which even a seasoned pilot could be prepared. The two blue lights neither advanced nor retreated, but remained fixed in position. Yet, it was in the moment that Tarucci observed more closely that he realized the two lights were not separate at all, but instead were the two ends of a colossal black object. Sensing the danger, Tarucci immediately contacted ground control. He requested permission to perform an emergency evasive maneuver. With approval from the ground, Tarucci sharply banked the Boeing 747 to the right. However, despite the abrupt maneuver, the massive object clung tightly behind the aircraft, mirroring its every move like a shadow. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, ground control urgently contacted the United States Air Force for assistance. Military radar confirmed that they too had detected an enormous object, appearing extremely close to Flight 1628. More importantly, they reported that the object had trailed the aircraft continuously for 14 minutes before vanishing from the radar screens in an instant. At the moment the colossal object disappeared, the 747 was only about 270 kilometers away from Anchorage Airport. Not wasting the opportunity, Tarucci quickly guided the Boeing 747 to a safe landing amid the silent, overwhelming relief of the three men who had just endured one of the most surreal and chilling moments in the history of civil aviation. Immediately after Flight 1628 landed safely at Anchorage, a tense atmosphere quickly engulfed the airport. Personnel from the Federal Aviation Administration, the military, and individuals whose affiliations were never disclosed appeared almost instantly and took control of the entire flight crew. The three members of the flight were led into separate interrogations where each was asked to recount in meticulous detail everything they had witnessed. The most remarkable thing was that, despite being completely isolated from one another, the testimonies of the three men matched with astonishing precision. They each described the blinding yellow-white objects moving with speeds and exhibiting forms that defied explanation. They each spoke of the terrifying moment when the massive black shadow bearing two soft blue lights drifted toward their aircraft, and they each recounted the eerie sensation when the entire cockpit was engulfed in an unnatural light and heat. It was not only the eyewitness accounts. Both military and civilian radar systems across Alaska had recorded the presence of unidentified objects at precisely the same times reported by the crew. Ground-based equipment captured clear images of unusual radar signals tracking the 747 for nearly half an hour, before abruptly vanishing without a trace. The United States government could not easily dismiss such evidence, yet instead of releasing the information to the public, authorities opted to gather all the material, radio communication recordings, radar data, and Captain Tarucci's hand-drawn sketches of the objects and send everything to Washington. Another noteworthy detail was the drawing that Tarucci submitted to the investigators. With simple yet careful lines, he depicted two luminous objects resembling two upright equal signs with a darkened central area flanked by bands of light emitting from countless spinning ports, a sight utterly unlike any known aircraft or technology. And yet, only a few days after the incident began to draw media attention, a wave of denial swiftly emerged. The United States government, with its familiar air of caution, declared that the radar anomalies were merely mistakes, and that what the crew had seen could have been Mars or Jupiter. But those who had actually sat behind the controls of Flight 1628 chose silence. Captain Tarucci and his colleagues offered no response and did not participate in any further interviews. For many years following that strange event, Flight 1628 seemed to fade into obscurity. Captain Tarucci Kenju, who had once confidently piloted the Boeing 747, suddenly resigned. His fellow crew members also disappeared from the reach of the media. All that remained were a few vague news clippings and a cloud of skeptical rumors. It was not until 2001, more than 15 years after the incident, that an unexpected door finally cracked open. On May 9, 2001 in Washington, D.C., a symposium known as the Disclosure Project was held, bringing together over 30 former high-ranking officials from the United States, including individuals who had once held prominent positions within the military, the Federal Aviation Administration, and even NASA. Among those who stepped up to the podium that day was a man named John Callahan, the former head of the FAA's Accident Investigation Division. Callahan recounted a story that left the entire hall in stunned silence. A story about Flight 1628's encounter and how the truth had been systematically buried. He revealed that immediately after the 1986 incident, all radar data, radio communication recordings, and Captain Tarucci's written report were urgently transferred to Washington. There, a secret meeting was convened, attended by no fewer than 10 people, including 3 science advisors to President Reagan, 3 FBI agents, 3 CIA operatives, and 1 representative from the White House. Callahan presented all the evidence the FAA had gathered. He emphasized that the objects recorded on radar were not technical errors or meteorological phenomena, but real tangible objects exhibiting flight behavior that defied all known laws of physics. Immediately, all the materials were seized. Callahan, who had painstakingly collected and analyzed the evidence as an aviation expert, was forced to sign a pledge of absolute secrecy. However, fortunately, he had managed to secretly keep a copy. Thanks to that courageous decision, at the 2001 symposium, Callahan brought these vivid pieces of evidence into the light, evidence that otherwise would have been buried forever in the dark archives of the government. Captain Tarucci's hand-drawn sketches, radar notes displaying the object's impossible speeds and capabilities, were all made public before the eyes of the international media. When John Callahan's revelations reignited memories of the 1986 incident, the eyes of the world's media immediately turned toward Japan Airlines, the place where the 3 flight crew members had quietly withdrawn from the spotlight after the event. Yet, the response the media received was nothing but silent, resigned headshakes. Japan Airlines confirmed that Captain Tarucci had resigned shortly after the incident, and since then, no one within the company had been able to contact him. The first officer and flight engineer had also completely vanished from reach. However, before the media blackout fully descended, a rare recording managed to surface. A brief interview given by Captain Tarucci himself to the Japanese press shortly after the incident. In the recording, his voice carried an unmistakable tremor, betraying a shock that was difficult to conceal. What I saw that day right above the skies of Alaska was not something belonging to the world of mankind, and I am certain that it did not originate from this dimension. Within the same recording, another dramatic detail was revealed when the massive black flying object began to approach the aircraft. Ground control had proactively asked Tarucci whether he wanted fighter jets dispatched for escort. In a brief moment of hesitation, Captain Tarucci wavered, but ultimately, he declined the offer. On the surface, that decision might seem irrational. Yet, upon closer reflection, it became clear that it was an act of extraordinary presence of mind, because Tarucci understood that if fighter jets closed in, there would be only 2 possible outcomes. Either the object would retaliate immediately, or even if confrontation was avoided, the military's involvement would subject the entire event to even tighter control, and he and his crew might face severe consequences. It is for this very reason that many veteran pilots, those who have inadvertently encountered phenomena far beyond the imagination, often choose the path of silence. Just 1 month after the strange incident involving Flight 1628, Japan witnessed yet another event. On December 21, 1986, over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, hundreds of nautical miles off the coast of Japan, the scientific survey vessel Kaomaru suddenly became an unexpected witness to another extraordinary phenomenon. That evening at around 6 p.m., the ship's advanced radar systems detected a massive object, moving at an incredibly high speed circling the vessel. However, when the scientists rushed out onto the deck, they saw nothing. The sky was clear, the visibility ideal, a perfect condition for observation. Yet, paradoxically, the enormous object existed only on the radar screens. According to the data they collected, the object had a minimum diameter of 300 meters, and its velocity reached up to 5,000 kilometers per hour. A figure far beyond the capability of any aircraft or technology known to mankind at that time. But the story did not end there. 2 hours later, at around 8 p.m., the mysterious object reappeared once again, circling the ship in a bizarre trajectory before abruptly vanishing. And then, like a game, 3 hours after that, at approximately 11 p.m., the object returned once more, approaching the vessel at tremendous speed. As the radar signals indicated that the object was nearly colliding with the ship, the night watch crew rushed out onto the deck only to find nothing. The following day, all radar data and incident reports were submitted by the scientists aboard Kaomaru to the Japanese scientific authorities. Extensive cross-checks were conducted to confirm that there had been no radar malfunctions and no equipment errors. This strange event was swiftly documented in an official scientific journal, becoming one of the very few unidentified flying object encounters to be acknowledged by the academic community. If the Flight 1628 incident could be described as a faint brush against the unknown, then what happened to Kaomaru just 1 month later stood as a firm affirmation that something beyond human understanding and beyond human control was silently present outside the borders of our perception. For decades, stories about UFOs had been pushed to the sidelines. However, in June 2021, for the first time in history, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence of the United States officially released an investigative report on the phenomenon of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. That report stated that out of 144 cases investigated from 2004 to March 2021, only one case had been identified as a balloon. The remaining 143 cases remained completely unexplained. The report also specified that in at least 18 instances, these objects demonstrated characteristics that violated the known laws of physics. For the first time, the United States government admitted to the world that there were unidentified aerial phenomena that exceeded human explanatory capabilities. One of the most recent events mentioned in the report was the incident that occurred on February 21st, 2021. American Airlines Flight 2292, while flying at an altitude of 36,000 feet over the skies of New Mexico, encountered a mysterious cylindrical object that shot past just overhead at an incredible speed. The FBI immediately launched an investigation, but afterward they issued only vague conclusions. What is even more alarming is that these phenomena often appear near areas associated with nuclear energy. From New Mexico, where the United States conducted its first nuclear tests, to the Fukushima nuclear power plant incident after the 2011 earthquake in Japan, reports of UFOs have surged inexplicably. When scientists at Fukushima installed cameras to monitor the area around the damaged plant 24/7, mysterious images were continually recorded. Luminous flying objects moving silently across the night sky reflected an eerie glow over the surface of the sea. From the Roswell incident of 1947 to the strange images captured around the Fukushima nuclear plant after the twin disasters of 2011. From military radars detecting unidentified objects lingering around nuclear testing grounds in New Mexico, all of it points to the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena. Yet what is perhaps even more telling is the attitude of the United States government toward these phenomena. They have stated that their greatest concern is not the question of whether extraterrestrial life exists, but the potential threat to national security. If these objects belong to another power on Earth, the consequences could be extremely serious. And if these objects truly come from an extraterrestrial civilization, then the question remains, how long until they make themselves known in our lives? If what you've just heard made you pause for a moment to reflect on the mysteries still hidden beyond the skies we thought we understood, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to continue journeying with us as we explore the mysteries that remain unsolved, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll see you again in the next story.